hosts as often as you change your passphrase. So if you do have questions, I will be answering these. Make sure that you ask your questions through the question and answer section through your GoToMeeting client. So what's the best practice in using the WPA2 encryption? Basically, this really applies for the Meraki Professional, where you have two distinct networks. You have your public Wi-Fi and you have your private Wi-Fi. The private Wi-Fi is what I'm referring to in the WPA2. You want to be able to give this access to your trusted users, whether it's your network staff, yourself, or trusted family members. Reason being is that they really have full reign on your network. If they decide to run BitTorrent or some kind of application that eats up all the bandwidth, those on the private network have complete use of the network bandwidth. So the WPA2 encryption is set through the private network, and that is on the Configure Basic page. And one of the things is that even if you decide to run a private network only, the public network SSID, which is the identification, will continue to broadcast. When people will actually get onto the public network, but when they, assuming that you lock everything down, once they get on there, they will get an IP address, but when they try to surf the web, the portal will not open, and they will get an access is denied or access blocked web page. But as of right now, there's no way to disable the public network SSID. It is always on, always broadcasted. That's for professional. For standard, same thing applies. You can the public network will always be on, always open. They just have to click through the portal to open it up. The reason that there is a private network is for the trusted users of your network, so that they can have full bandwidth access to your network. They're not restricted. Usually in a standard deployment, some people will put down the bandwidth throttle to maybe half a meg. Those that are on the public network, or excuse me, on the private network, will have full use of the network, and they can use as little or as much as they want. So the next thing is security with the dashboard and even with the splash page. Like I mentioned before, it is accessible for username and password. It is done through HTTPS, so a tunnel is established between your client and the Meraki servers. And so for your end users that are actually trying to submit their credit card through the splash page, they should see the HTTPS there. And once the HTTPS is there, it'll be an encrypted tunnel, so people that are sniffing your network, and if you actually do a little research on how to sniff a network, you'll realize how much information is exposed. But given that it's HTTPS, usernames and passwords on the dashboard, and usernames and passwords and credit card numbers using the dashboard and splash page are encrypted, so sniffers will not see it. One of the myths that we have here is that all the end users traffic propagates through the Meraki servers. So in a typical scenario, you'd have your end user surfing Google or eBay, and then that traffic would go from their computer through your network back to us, and then to eBay, and then back to us, and then back to your network, and then into your user. That's incorrect. The reality is that all the traffic exists on your local network. When your user, yourself or your end user, decide to go from your client to eBay.com, it goes from the client through your network to eBay, back to your network, and back to your client. The only reason that Meraki is in play for that is that if they have to authenticate the user, if you have to use the dashboard yourself, as you can imagine, we have several thousand networks. If we propagated all the traffic through us, everything would be very, very slow. So if there is problems from your end user perspective, and they say they can't access Google, they can't access eBay, they can't access Amazon, most likely the problem is with your network. I would check your domain name server, your DNS, and see if you can if it can resolve the IP addresses for the Amazons or the eBays or the Googles or the Yahoos. That best practice part is a flaw there. A couple more things about security. Protecting internal resources, and this seems to bring up a lot of question marks on what this means and how to deploy this stuff. So under the Configure tab, Advanced, you will see this thing called Security, prevent users from accessing your LAN. And then you will see the diagram below that. This is the typical deployment that you should practice with Meraki. This is the typical deployment that we'll support. So let me explain this diagram here. You have your border router, your cable modem. You have a public IP address that is assigned by your ISP, whether it's your cable modem or your DSL. That cable modem will NAT it, which is network address translation, and I will talk about that in a little bit, but take it as it is. So it'll do a network translation. Your local network from that router will basically be a whole 192.168.1.0/24 address, which basically means addresses .1 through .254 are available for your internal resources. So that could be the Meraki Mini itself, it could be the file server, which is on .30, the printer on .20, or another server on .10. And then so you would plug the Meraki Mini directly into this, and it would get an IP address. I didn't assign one here, but let's say it's .40. So it's 192.168.1.40. And then from the Meraki Mini, it'll do another network address translation. And then any devices behind the Meraki will get the 10.x.x.x address. In this case, you have a couple computers and a PDA. So what does prevent users from accessing your LAN mean? Basically, let's assume that you are on computer 10.1.1.1, and prevent users from accessing your LAN is set to yes. So under this scenario, that 10.1.1.1 cannot access any of those computers, .30, .20, or .10. It's automatically forwarded out from the Meraki to the border gateway router, to the border router. Basically what happens is that there's an access control list, or an ACL, that forwards the traffic out, and it blocks it from talking to anything else on the 192.168.1.x network. So, however, if you have prevent users from accessing your LAN set to no, any computer behind the Meraki is now free to talk with any device on the 192.168.1.0. So if you want to print stuff, if you want to FTP stuff to the .30 server, or you want to mount stuff onto the .10 server, then you're free to do that using whatever application, such as Samba. One of the limitations of Meraki is that they're not very good at communicating within the mesh. So device laptop 10.1.1.1 cannot speak with 10.1.1.2 or 1.3. That's one of the limitations of the Meraki. However, as long as the device is connected to your main LAN, it's free to communicate with that. So if you have a wide open network that you decide to share, you may want to lock this down to prevent people from getting into your other devices that you don't want them to.